Ndugu Spika, nimesikia ndugu yangu Mungatana akizungumza, nikajiuliza sijui yeye ameishi nchi gani. Kwa sababu ndugu Spika, sababu huu mswada umeletwa hapa si eti ni mswada ambao unamkataza mwananchi wa kawaida ama kiongozi yule ambaye ana hela ya kulipa ama asaidie mahali kuna ugumu atoe hiyo hela. Shida iliyoko huu mswada haja yake ni kuhakikisha kuwa wale ambao ni viongozi tumekuwa tukiiba rasilimali za wananchi, alafu tunaenda mpaka kwa matanga ndio kwenda kuonyesha wale watu maskini kwa wewe unaweza kulipa shilingi 1200 kumzika mtu aliyefariki, lakini wakati ulikuwa kiongozi haukuamka kuzungumza vile atatibiwa kwa hospitali ambako hamna madawa. Sheria ambayo tunataka kubadilisha ni kutoa ufisadi kutoka kwa kusaidia watu maskini, kwa sababu vile tunavyosaidia watu maskini tuna pretend kuwa tunawasaidia, lakini hatusuluhishi yale mashida ama zile shida ambazo nchi yetu inazo. So ndugu zangu wale mko hapa, mnaweza kufanya amendment, nakubali na nyinyi, lakini wacha niwaambie hivi: kwa sababu sisi ndio tumeharibu uongozi wa nchi yetu, kwa sababu sisi ndio mafisadi wakubwa, kwa sababu sisi ndio tumapretenda wakubwa, barabara ni mbaya, hospitali ni mbaya, madawa hakuna hospitali, maji hayako nyumbani, alafu ukisikia mtu ana diarrhea unasema tumia hao jamaa watu washakufa, tutamzika ki? Ningependa kuwauliza nyinyi viongozi hapa, huu mswada uendelee hivyo hivyo, tutoe ufisadi kutoka kwa kusaidia mtu maskini, ili ukitoa pesa kanisa ama ukitoa pesa kwa mchango, tumia Safaricom na useme hiyo pesa ulitoa wapi, ukaleta kunitolea wakati nimefariki, kwa sababu wakati ambako nilikuwa mgonjwa hakukuwa na madawa. Asante ndugu Speaker.
Senator Boni.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, taking over from where the Senator of Kisii has left, I want to remind colleagues that this is our baby. When we rose to respond to the disaster of the Gen Z, one of the things we resolved upon in this House, in that great debate that we had never seen before, was that we had to address the displeasure by the young people on how we spend all our time showing off opulence, choppers, vehicles that cost over 51 million shillings. And the youth, because they are better educated than what our generation was at their time, they are able to relate your income to what you contribute in Harambee. So we said, let us regulate this. The intention of this bill, and I want to urge colleagues, let us read it. The intention is not to abolish Harambees. The intention is to sanitize. The intention is to make it decent. The intention is to make sure that we don't hide in Harambees to practice corruption. How can you accept the fact that you are taking your ill-gotten money to a funeral of a mass accident like the one we had in Ekolomani at Ego River, Lukose? You take those millions, and yet the reasons why the accident took place is the bad state of the roads. If you had a dual carriage from Nairobi to Kakamega to Busia and Uganda, the accidents that take place on these roads would be cut by over 80%. So, Senator Mungatana, thank you very much for your passion. But the point is, don't give us money which you have stolen, which would have fixed the roads, And those bad roads have caused us to die. Don't bring us that money. Allow the police to come after you so that you can be brought to order.
What is your point of order, Senator Mungatana? Did you?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, did you hear the senator from Kakamega, my very good honorable friend, say that they don't bring us the money that you have stolen? Mr. Speaker, is it a presumption that every person who actually, out of his good heart, or out of the problem that is there, and I'm speaking from about my county, Mr. Speaker, I don't know, Kakamega, maybe they are rich, Mr. Speaker. People are dying of hunger. If you get something and you want to help, is it a presumption, Mr. Speaker, that the people who are helping, the teachers, the doctors, the more prosperous farmers are thieves? Mr. Speaker, can Mr. Khallwale, Honorable Khallwale, my very good friend, please stop playing to the gallery and address the issues? I don't think that is a correct statement, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Mungatana, I don't think the Honorable Senator for Kakamega meant what you've just said. Indeed, if you remember during the debate on the state of the nation, none other than honorable senators were of the view, and that was after listening to the general public, that there could be dirty money that gets its way into the Harambees. And therefore, it's important to bring transparency in the Harambees. It's decent to bring some accountability in the way we do these Harambees. And out of that concern that the House had, and in fact, this House went to resolve certain actions to be taken. One of them is basically to legislate and bring sanity in the Harambee space. So yes, there's that general perception. And not everybody who contributes in a Harambee is a thief. But as you know, if I might use a Kiswahili saying, samaki moja kioza, bahari mzima imeoza. So this particular piece of legislation is to address that particular one thief and leave there 1,000 wonderful people. But at least that particular one person who we are not sure of how their sources of, these funds, the fund do not make its way into the hands of the public. That's why this law is proposed. But I do not think the Honorable Senator for Kakamega had an ill motive by saying that some of this money that would have otherwise fixed a road ended up in the wrong hands, and it is that money that is coming at the tail end to bury victims of that very bad road, which bad road came as a result of the money that had been maybe stolen. So it is that space that we are trying to clean up. There are good people who will bring their hard-earned money, and there are those questionable amounts that still find the way. So to clean up, to make sure that we have good money in this Harambee ecosystem, the proposed law is just to sanitize that space. Senator Boni.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wouldn't have put it better. And I truly want to thank you. This bill is not a joke. Mr. Speaker, there is still money meant for drugs in hospital. And thanks to that shortage, patients die and they come to bury us. Mr. Speaker, there is still money meant to fix our roads. Mr. Speaker, they go ahead and buy four-wheel drives that can avoid potholes and buy choppers, and courtesy of those bad roads, when we die, they come to show us. We don't want that money. Mr. Speaker, in Tana River, I have had the choice and pleasure for 6 years to practice medicine in the Coast Province. And I know what poverty has done, not just in Western, but in Coast. So, Mr. Speaker, there is still money meant to improve the productivity of the lands in Coast so that they allow the people of Tana River to come to them through Harambees begging for food. Mr. Speaker, through this law, we don't want that kind of money. And Mr. Speaker, this law has been very well thought through. When you read through, Mr. Speaker, it is not casual. Let me respond, for example, to the concerns in this bill of the Senator of Tana River. We have Part Roman 3, which speaks to fundraising appeals. And they say, Mr. Speaker, in Clause 8, that the provision of this part shall not apply to a private fundraising appeal where the solicitation is made from members of for beneficiaries of the nuclear family or relatives and does not extend to members of the public. Clearly, this bill is going to allow us to sit as a family in Marinya, a family in Idaho, and do our fundraising. What they are against is public fundraising. And the law has gone further, Mr. Speaker, in Clause 9, has created distinction between public and private fundraising. It is the public fundraising that we want to control. I therefore, Mr. Speaker, wish to appeal to colleagues. Let's go through this proposal with a tooth comb so that we can refine it for it to be better. Are you saying this thing is a joke? When you saw a few days ago, none other than the Catholic bishops of Kenya speak to this issue. And in fact, Mr. Speaker, in unprecedented action, Archbishop Anyolo, who for the information of this House, is a man born from Shinyalu, and he's the Archbishop here in Nairobi. Philip Anyolo has done the unthinkable. He has returned money to politicians. So when you say we are doing something that does not appeal to the public, knowing that Catholics control over 50% of the Christians in this country, knowing that the Catholics have permeated all our villages and they could possibly be the voice of the poor who we pretend to be assisting when actually thieves are using that opportunity to sanitize money that they have stolen from our coffers. We must address it so that on Sunday, when I go to church, when you go to church, when all our other politicians go, including the head of state, he can comfortably make his contribution without any worries as to the interpretation. And this law has gone further, Mr. Speaker. They have said in this law, in Clause 11, they have put exemptions. Exemptions are here. Senator for Narok, if you go to Clause 11, they tell you money or property collected by or under the authority of a recognized representative of a religious association is exempted. It means once the law is through, we can then go to Archbishop Anyolo and give him our contribution to help the church to be constructed. I would be the last person, Mr. Speaker, to fight the Harambee spirit. Because if it had not been for the 100 shillings in 1976, which Mwirizali Halanganga gave me as a contribution to my Harambee, I would not have finished my education in Msingo High School. Mr. Speaker, Msingo High School, one of the top schools in this country, was started by the spirit of Harambee. Shibwe Hospital today, which I have created from a dispensary, that dispensary was started by Harambee. So Harambee is good, but unregulated, you leave it to where you see people using it to sanitize the money they steal from us. Mr. Speaker, I want to conclude by acknowledging that this is indeed a difficult decision to make, because somebody who will not take trouble to read this law, he will think you are against charitable activity. No. In fact, one of the charitable organizations that I belong to, Touch Africa, where I'm a director of the foundation, was started by the late Michael Kijana Wamalwa because he believed in touching people. We want to touch people, but touch them with honor and touch them not when we are taking advantage of them. Mr. Speaker, I support strongly and I propose that at the right time we'll come with proposals to amend so as to make this bill better. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Olekina.
Mr. Speaker, let me begin by saying that I have no beef with people coming together to be able to help one individual improve their status of living. Mr. Speaker, I grew up in a society where we encourage a lot of the Harambee movement, but I believe that the pace which we are taking now, Mr. Speaker, to be able to regulate fundraisings is completely ill-advised. And I say so, Mr. Speaker, because I've taken some time to read through this fundraising bill. And I do not support the proposals which are being made in this bill. Mr. Speaker, we are a society, a country, which now we should be working hard to ensure that every citizen has got access to free health care. We should be working so hard, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that every student, every young kid born from the Bundus of Narok or from the other Bundus of Lake Turkana are able to get access to quality and free education as well as healthcare. Mr. Speaker, what we are doing now by regulating this kind of fundraising is by making sure that we are condemning this generation into poverty. Mr. Speaker, I completely detest that approach. I've sat down there listening to the Chief Whip talking about when he went to school that he could not have finished school without Harambee. That is very true to all of us. But are we going to stagnate and stay there for the rest of our generation? Or are we going to do things differently? Earlier on, in the morning session, Mr. Speaker, we had the Cabinet Secretary of Housing, Lands and Housing. And she made a statement here and said that Narok County, with 6 sub-counties, will be entitled to a minimum of 220 houses per sub-county. That makes it about 1,320 houses for Narok County. When I stood to inquire further on that, she said that that is just the beginning. Mr. Speaker, I want to invite my colleagues for us to discuss here is how do we make sure that if our funds are being deducted from our salaries, we can guarantee that those who have not been given an opportunity to get where we are, the state takes that responsibility. When you now require us to profile individuals who are going to be carrying out fundraising activities, Mr. Speaker, the only thing that I conclude is that we are content with being poor, and we are content with widening the gap between the rich and the poor. Mr. Speaker, you cannot say that you will maintain an annual register of persons licensed by it to conduct a public fundraising appeal under this act. You go further and you say that you are now going to have a cabinet secretary who is going to authorize. You go further and you say that in each and every county, Mr. Speaker, you're going to have a CC member who is going to keep a register. I think, Mr. Speaker, we are losing. We are completely losing our trajectory in terms of development in this country. If we were arguing, if the sponsor of this bill was saying, let us now regulate charitable organizations. Let us register charitable organizations that can be able to spell out their mission and goals. We regulate them and allow them to carry out fundraising. In America, where I spent almost 20 years of my life, we had non-profit organizations, we have charitable organizations, but now when it comes here and you're saying you want to be able to profile individuals and keep a list of individuals, I wish we were talking about keeping a list of charitable organizations. I think we need to change, Mr. Speaker. We need to start saying, when did the rain start beating us to a point where now primary schools, we are paying them, when we had made progress, when the late president came into power, where kids could easily go to school for free. Right now, Mr. Speaker, if you ask any of these members who are seated here to show you their phones, there is a Harambee invitation for Harambee to pay for kids to go to school. There is a Harambee for a person to go to hospital. And then, Mr. Speaker, in this bill, it talks about, which I really detest completely. It says, this is an act of parliament to provide a framework for regulations in the conduct of public fundraising appeals to promote transparency and accountability in carrying out of fundraising appeals and foster great philanthropy. How do you foster great philanthropy when everybody in this country knows that the only people who can come up with money are politicians? Aren't you just encouraging corruption then? Aren't you encouraging an issue where you are elected into office because of how much you can be able to give instead of meritocracy? I think we need to focus on developing this nation. We need to come up with policies that will ensure that we narrow this gap between the rich and the poor, those who have and those who have none. We made progress by introducing a new constitution, where now we have counties. You know, even the way we make legislation, Mr. Speaker, has got to change now completely. It has got to change. I long for the time that we will be sitting here and saying, in Tana River County, the residents of that county have decided that every child in that county will go to school for free, and that the money that they are being taxed will be able to be directed there. But now, if we are even regulating fundraising, and then in this same law, you say you are excluding, I like what my good friend Bonnie Khallwale said, we are excluding family fundraising activities. You know? I mean, seriously. I want to beseech all of us that we move away from this kind of legislation. We are over-legislating. I want to beseech all of us that we sit down and say, how are we going to make sure that we develop policies that will ensure that in future, a granddaughter of the majority whip or majority leader will be able to go to school and not having to worry about Harambees. You know? Yes. You know, this issue of majority leader for us keep on saying Harambee, Harambee, Harambee is really pushing us back. We were profiled as a less developed country. We went up to now a medium developing country, a developing country. We have now gone to a point where now we are saying there are those developed nations. And when we go to these international conferences, and I'm sure my good brother, the chair of PAC, will tell you that when they went to COP29, our presidents did not even go. So it was just a room full of individuals who have got dreams but cannot be able to implement them. They were just talking about, we want to give Africa $1.3 trillion just because we spent $3 trillion in promoting warfare among countries. It's a talk shop. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to plead with the sponsor of this bill, my good brother, my good friend, the majority leader, to change, to amend everything and say, let us regulate charitable organizations. That is number one. I will support him 100% on that. Number two, let us ensure that we've registered these non-profits such that if they are supported by an entity outside the country, whatever is imported here is not taxed again at the airport. Because you've seen, I'm sure the majority leader has received so many phone calls from NGOs saying, these books were donated to us, but they are now asking us to pay taxes. So, to save this, let us not limit it down to individuals. Let us come up with the proper regulations of charitable organizations. Let us persuade each county to say, what is the biggest problem? Recently, Mr. Speaker, I saw a Gazette notice where the Cabinet Secretary in charge of Foreign Affairs has decided to give immunity to one charitable organization called the Melinda Gates Foundation, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And in the reasoning of giving that immunity, there's one word that caught my attention. This is a charity organization that has been set up to fight poverty. And that is now where we are giving them immunity. But that immunity only extends to expatriates who come and work in this country. But Kenyans who would have been co-opted to work in that company will not be immune. Come on. Why are we creating these different classes? Why are we profiling people? So I want to support, and I plead with Majority Leader, because he's one young man who is very, very intelligent and has really managed to change a lot of things, that let us, during the committee of the whole, change the act or the proposed legislation. Let us strictly regulate charitable organizations. Once we regulate those charitable organizations, the role of counties can now come in and say, because we all know our counties. We all know the status of our counties. We are informed by session paper number 10 of 1965. We are informed by the current situations of our division of revenue bill, our CARA, how money is divided. We are informed by the debate that we have on a daily basis of how we divide revenue, whether by the size of the land or by the number of people who are there. We are informed by the Kenya Bureau of Statistics that tells us about the poverty in our counties. Why can we then ensure that in each and every county, Mr. Speaker, charitable organizations that are set up to work there are helped, assisted, and they are registered based on the circumstances of each of that county? There will be no interest of you supporting a charitable organization that is coming to Narok to be able to count wild animals. What for? But if you're telling me that you will go to West Pokot and ensure that you are funding a charitable organization that brings people together for cohesion, make sure that it supports education, I'll be among the first one to say, let's go for it. So, Mr. Speaker, to end, I would like to see this bill becomes law, but let us make it such that it doesn't profile people. Number two, such that it doesn't keep us stagnating. Let us now think like these developed nations that want to sponsor this charity organization. And you will know something, Mr. Speaker, as I wind up. A lot of these charity organizations will raise $1 billion. And they will say, we are going to fight poverty in Africa. And they will say, for Kenya, we'll give Kenya $200 million. I'm telling you, Mr. Speaker, and this is a fact, and you can go check. By the time that money lands to Kenya, 80% has gone into administration. Only 20% is what ends up fighting that poverty. So, Mr. Speaker, this is an area that I'm quite vast, and I want to support the majority leader in regulating charitable organizations. We want to make it easy for people to be able to improve their standard of living. If today I want to go to Senator Kipsang's home and support a local church there, I should not be regulated to do that, really. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Chimera.